Hello, and welcome to Remembering Together, the LMJ's podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harrold. Each month, we explore the many ways Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia touch our lives, from personal stories of families affected by this disease to the ongoing efforts to find a cure. Join us as we raise awareness, share support, and learn together about the impact of Alzheimer's on nearly 7 million people worldwide. Let's remember together and work toward a future where no one faces this disease alone. Welcome back to Remembering Together, an LMJ's podcast. We are now at episode number 3 of the podcast. I did not think I would make it here, but we are here, and now I've got some heavy-hitting guests with us today. For those of you who don't know, my name is Matt Harrold. The hardest part of hosting a podcast is having to listen as opposed to talk, because I love to listen to myself talk. But I have 2 absolutely amazing guests with me here today. The first guest is someone with more than 13 years of real estate or of estate planning experience who has helped hundreds of families throughout her career. Guest number 2 is someone with over 37 years of experience in the financial planning industry. He is someone who has helped hundreds of people throughout his career. His goal is to help his clients protect themselves from themselves. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first guest, Caroline Hecht, partner at Buckley Fine Law and guardian ad litem for Lake County. Close?
You got it, Matt.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Carolyn, thank you for being here today. Guest number 2, Mike May is a financial planner with the designation of Certified Financial Planner with OSAIC Financial Advisors. Mike, thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so ladies first, as we always will do on the podcast here. So, Carolyn, tell us about yourself.
So I'm a partner at a law firm in Barrington, and I primarily do, as Matt mentioned, estate planning, and then I also do estate and trust administration. So the estate planning piece is helping families develop that very important plan for what happens if they become disabled or pass away. And then I also do, unfortunately, after death administration, and then also assist clients when a family member has become incapacitated. Although I don't like that piece as much because that's a little bit more challenging to do, I think it's a huge benefit because I can kind of see both sides. So I'm not just, presenting documents to a client and saying, fingers crossed, I hope they work when the time comes. I'm actually able to help them when those difficult situations arise. And then I also, as you had mentioned, I'm a guardian ad litem for Lake County. And what that means is that I'm appointed by the court in disabled adult cases. And so someone files a petition stating a family member is unable to make decisions for themselves anymore. And then I go in and meet with that person and then report back to the judge if that person is indeed disabled and needs a guardian appointed by the court.
So that's the professional side. So I like when the audience knows the person too. So tell us about a little bit of your personal life. Not too personal, but let's hear a little bit.
So not just the resume.
Correct. This is not an interview.
So I'm married. My husband is Brian, and I have 2 kids, Haley and Owen. They're 5 and 7. And a bit of a crazy time right now with the holidays coming up. So between work and the household, but we love travel. We are a unique family that spent a month in Greece this year. I'm really big into exposing my kids to international cultures, and they got to go to school in Greece for a month.
That's awesome. I'm jealous because that was really cool to hear about. So, Carolyn, thank you again for being here. Mike, the floor is yours for a little bit, okay?
All right, thank you, Matt. A little on the personal side, born and raised here in Chicago. Great place to be. I have a wife of 33 years.
No pressure.
3 children, Kristen 28, Caitlin 26, and Brian 24. Thankfully, they're all still local, but also thankfully they're done with college. So I feel fortunate to have joined a company at a school that helped me learn financial planning from the ground up. Back when I started, which was many years ago, everything was more focused on a product, whether it was an investment or insurance policy. No one was really doing planning. But I came on board at, then it was Cigna, eventually came Lincoln, eventually became OSAIC. But I'm doing the same thing I've always been doing, comprehensive planning. We spend a lot of time with our clients figuring out what's important to them, setting those goals, and then putting a plan together that's going to get them where they want to go. So I'm kind of like a combination GPS and Uber. We pick you up where you are, we figure out where you want to go, and we have to do some recalculating, right? Hit those construction sites or roadblocks, but we figure out how to get you there. I don't replace CPAs. I don't replace attorneys like Caroline. It's not what I do.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I tend to quarterback the person's financial plan.
It's awesome. No, thank you both again. I know you're both experts in what you do because I know you both very well personally. So as we get personal, if you guys want to, obviously this is an LMJ's podcast, so we're going to talk about the dreaded words of Alzheimer's and dementia a little bit here. So if you guys want to both share your personal experiences with Alzheimer's and dementia with the audience here. Either one of you. Yep.
So I've had some family members with Alzheimer's and dementia. Most recently, my husband's grandmother was diagnosed with it. So it's been a challenging last year, balancing. Is she able to stay at home? Can my husband's grandfather, take care of her? Recently, they had to transition to the assisted living facility, and just sort of watching that progression of the illness has been really challenging. And then with what I do, so I have a lot of clients that do come in when they have an initial diagnosis. The goal is always to come in before the disease progresses, but I have experienced clients that are, kind of grappling with, they understand that they have the illness, all the family member understands as well, and just trying to make sure that they have a plan in place, but it's very difficult to watch them go through that.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I currently have 2 clients and 1 family member dealing with dementia. They're all kind of at different stages. 2 of them are in assisted living. One of those people needs help with everything. Is getting out of bed, getting dressed, and that decline happened very, very quickly. They can't walk at this point, but they're in a great place, which is good. Second client is in assisted living, but he's a little more independent. He needs help with certain things, but he's going to be 92, so more along the lines of repeating things, over and over. And then my mom is actually the one that is the one the closest to me, diagnosed with dementia / Alzheimer's. She has not progressed as quickly as I've seen in other cases, which I'm thankful for. But if you think about it, since 2011, the baby boomer generation, 10,000 people a day are turning 65. And that's going to happen until 2030. So as our population ages, you're just going to see more and more of that happening. And I think to Caroline's point, when the person realizes it, I think some do and some don't, but when the person realizes it, I think it's that much harder on them and on the family.
I just echo all the things you guys said. Obviously, going through this personally, and what you guys are experienced or have experienced, you're not only experts in what you do professionally, but you're also have a deep care about this and trying to educate people, help them, and obviously, big supporters of what we're trying to do here, and we want to find a cure. So, you guys have brought up a couple of things about after planning. What does planning mean? And a lot of people talk about at the end or when it's over. Obviously, what you guys are big into is talking about maybe not the here and now, but the current and what the future looks like while you're living. So, how does someone prepare, or safeguard their money for should there be a diagnosis? So, kind of. I know you both have kind of different, you do the same, but you do it different. Obviously, you guys work together. So kind of how does somebody prepare and make sure that they're protecting themselves?
So I think the most important thing is as soon as there's a diagnosis, you have to start meeting with your professionals. So I usually consider there's three main professionals: the attorney, financial advisor, and the CPA. It's important to have your team together, and I like to refer to it as a three-legged stool, right? If you take away one of those legs, it's going to wobble and fall over. And so the thing, when you're putting together your team, you have the assurance that you're not just working with the attorney to create an estate plan and then not matching your financial accounts to correspond with that estate plan. That's a big mistake that a lot of people make, but you really have to start doing it right away, because especially with Alzheimer's and dementia, as Mike said, there's varying levels of progression with the disease. So some people, the decline is very quick, and others not so much, and you don't necessarily know if that's going to be your situation. And so you want to make sure that you're doing it the sooner the better, because sometimes, unfortunately, I've had people come to me and the disease has progressed too much and they don't have legal capacity to sign documents. And that's such a big problem for families that are already going through an awful situation.
Yeah, I would echo those comments and say that, it's kind of never too early to sit down and start putting your estate plan together. I think sometimes, this will sound strange, but I think sometimes it's easier when a client dies versus them being physically or mentally incapacitated for a long time. I call that more of a living death. It's a terrible term, but it's the reality, right? And Matt, I know you went through process with me and with Caroline, and I think you probably sleep a little better at night because you didn't know what you didn't know. I think
minus the two kids and that.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I mean, I don't ever sleep well. But yes, correct. Yes, I would if I didn't have
right.
to get woken up. But yes,
but
correct.
those kids were also motivation for
Correct.
you because you
100%.
want to know exactly who's gonna, take care of them, who's gonna be responsible for them, and that's huge. So, it's much different. To Caroline's point, when someone starts to go down that road, you got to make sure you get things done before it's too late.
And I think you talked about that living death side of it, and when people talk about my own personal experience, it's like they die twice.
Right.
And that's how I look at my mom, and obviously when it's like officially gone, it's a terrible feeling. But it was like, when is that moment when you knew it was like that person that you knew is gone? And so, kind of piggybacks into the next thing I want to ask you guys about is when it comes to healthcare costs. Obviously, that's a big part of this. So, why is that so important? What is going on in the marketplace there as we kind of talk about healthcare as being very, very important?
Well, so Fidelity did a study, and basically what they determined was in your retirement years, you will probably need somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000 for your medical expenses. So, and that doesn't really include if you end up in a,
That's general.
Yeah,
that's general healthcare.
than I would have
exactly. So, to that end, I think it's, any time that you can get ahead of something. So it's all about, in my mind, it's all about planning. So whether you're your age or someone who's 70 or 60, no matter where you are in your life, it's never too late to plan, and that planning will pay big dividends. When I look at my own situation, where I've got one client that pays about $10,000 a month to live where they live, another one pays about $8,000 to live where they live, and they're still relatively independent. And my mom is still independent. I mean, we help her quite a bit, but she's still independent. She pays about $600,000 a month, and I think the demand is only going to go up. So, the whole supply and demand thing, the more something's in demand, the more expensive it becomes.
And then to add on to that, I'll just share a quick story about a family I recently met with. So I spoke with a husband, wife at only 51, has very severe dementia, which you don't think it's that that happens, and
Right.
it's been a very quick progression. Well, as I've been talking to him, they have no estate plan. She didn't elect any long-term care insurance through her employer. No, just recently, because of all this happened, the husband got, financial advisor in place. But I wish I could turn back the clock for them and have this happen, have them meet with professionals years before, because a lot of the issues they're faced with now, we can't do anything about. I can't create an estate plan for her. She doesn't have capacity. We can't retroactively get her the long-term care insurance. And now he's faced with a difficult situation because of the rising cost of health care. Well, do they get divorced to stop the bleeding? I hate to say that. It's another whole other
Right.
issue, but to stop the bleeding on their joint assets to pay for her long-term care. I can't stress it enough, the benefit of meeting with a professional, especially someone like Mike, where you can go through, hey, are you electing the right benefits that are available to you at work? Are there private long-term care policies you can consider? Because none of us think we're going to get sick, and who knows what will actually happen, but planning for that is just so very important.
And if I recall correctly, and when I asked you, do you want to do this podcast, and we had a conversation, and then I believe it was within 15, 20 minutes of that is when is that the specific client, that phone call came through? So,
I said I couldn't believe exactly what we were talking about, and then I got that call, and it was just terrible.
And unfortunately, that, to your point, you'd never know when the timing of it is. That was obviously very coincidental, but the timing of when you're going to need said services that we're talking about or things in place there. So when it comes to putting things in place, what this term I'm gonna ask you guys to bring it down to Matt level and let's demify things a little bit. So we talk about power of attorney. We talk about will. We talk about trust. If you want to break down in any specific order what it means, what's a will, what's a trust, what is a power of attorney, I now know, so you guys have educated me immensely there, but to the people listening and potentially watching, kind of let's help make things make sense in Matt terms.
I'll let the attorney kick it off.
Well, and I was going to say, because I went through it with you, maybe you should explain it to me now.
So as the host, I enjoy when the guests speak, and yes, so thank you so much. Yes, go ahead.
So with an estate plan, the important thing to consider is that it's not just death that the plan is providing for, but it's disability as well. So there's certain documents that are applicable only at death and some for disability. In terms of the death documents, we have a will. So will is always a term you hear in movies and things like that. But for the record, there is no such thing as a reading of a will. I've had people call and ask me
Hollywood is wrong again.
when are you going to read Dad's will? I'm like, yeah, that's not a thing. I'll give you a copy and you can read it at home. But a will is a document that says when a person passes away, who gets what of the assets, who's in charge of distributing those assets, and then on what terms. And then for some clients, actually many clients, revocable living trust is an important document as well. I would say most of my clients have a revocable living trust because it's going to avoid a court process at death known as probate, which is very expensive, especially in Illinois. Law says you have to have an attorney. Great for me, not so much for families. So that's usually a really important piece of your plan. The revocable trust can also, it provides instructions just like a will would, but then you're also nominating someone to be in charge. And that person that is known as a trustee, and that person can manage assets not only when the trust creator becomes disabled, but also at death. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 benefit with that revocable living trust. And then there are 2 types of powers of attorney. So the one that people most think of most often is the healthcare power of attorney. So that's a document where you name an agent to make healthcare decisions for you when a doctor says you're unable to make those on your own. The important thing to consider is for those that don't have an estate plan, between a husband and wife, you don't have unfettered discretion to make decisions on behalf of your spouse. So if you don't have that power of attorney document in place, the only option is what we call the Healthcare Surrogate Act in Illinois, and it's a limited scope decision-making power that your spouse or other family members can make on your behalf. So it's so very important because you think, well, my husband Brian, I should be able to, if he got sick, I'm his wife, why wouldn't I just get to decide? But that's not the case. You really need that healthcare power of attorney in place. Sister document to that would be a HIPAA release. So HIPAA's our medical privacy laws. So you want to make sure that anyone you've named as your healthcare agent has access to all necessary information to make the best decision possible for you. And then a financial power of attorney. Financial power of attorney is a document similar to the healthcare. When you can't manage your financial affairs anymore, you're naming an agent to essentially step into your shoes and make all decisions that you would otherwise be able to do but for you being sick. And again, same thing. If I became incapacitated, my husband Brian can't manage my 401k. And you think, well, wait a minute, that's money, we were both, me personally contributing into, but it's money meant for our family. But just because he's my spouse, he has no control over that. So very important document to have.
So, Mike, I think she did this in the correct order here, so very good job. When it comes to the financial side of that, what is it that I know you do when you talk to clients with all of these things and why it's so important from a financial standpoint to have these things in place?
Yeah, well, certainly having a good attorney and someone like Caroline is huge because they've got the experience, they've got the knowledge, and she's got expertise. So she's not doing real estate closings and
dog bite cases.
Exactly. Med mal. She's doing estate planning, which is huge. And I just saw this pay off. Caroline wasn't the attorney, but I just saw this pay off with the client having those documents in place because with one client we needed to sell the house and we had a bid very, very quickly. As you know, houses could move quickly. But she had everything was done. So the nephew could step in as power of attorney and handle all that stuff, and she didn't need to be involved at all. So it saves a lot of emotional toll as well. And then the other piece is speaking to when you have these documents, once you have the documents, you've got to coordinate the titling of your assets and the beneficiary designations. And it doesn't sound that complicated, but when you look at all the places where assets can go and you start talking about primary beneficiaries versus contingent beneficiaries versus this is a retirement plan and it hasn't been taxed yet, so where do we want that money to go? Now, typically it would be a surviving spouse and we're okay, but when it starts to get down to the kids, now you've got a lot more things to think about. You got to think about income taxes. You got to think about how quickly they got to take that money. So it all just becomes a big puzzle that you've got to put all the pieces together. And to Caroline's point, it's never too early to start doing this stuff.
And it's so important for families that have recent Alzheimer's, dementia diagnosis. I would highly recommend not only getting your plan in place, but making it so that when there is the inevitable point when the person's not going to have capacity anymore, coordinating with the financial advisor, getting someone like Mike a copy of the power of attorney. Hey, Mike, keep this on file. Is there an additional form that may be required that the person should sign now to make sure we don't have any roadblocks to actually having those documents put into place?
Kind of, if you guys want to explain how that exact thing works that you brought up, where they have done the correct things. There's, they have the power of attorney and that done. So how does that work when it's, what does a family do or what should a family do next when a family member is deemed incapable of, making their own decisions there? So how does that, when you to the client, or to their family, what do they do then? Is that just like present the document? How does that work for them as the family member for their incapable or not able to make their own decisions family member?
So there's two types, or there's two ways a power of attorney could be structured. So the first is you make it effective upon signing, so that if and when it's needed in the future, it's ready to go. The second option is making it effective upon the person being declared disabled. So if it's that second option and the person's capacity is starting to decline, then the agent named in the document will need to get a letter from the principal's attorney stating this person can't manage their financial affairs anymore, and now the financial power of attorney is activated. Me personally, in experience, I don't like the effective upon disability only documents, because what I found, practically speaking, is it's becoming very difficult for people to get those doctor's letters. I've had some clients tell me, well, I've gone to 3 doctors. You know, all their progress notes will say this person has vascular dementia, but they won't put it in a letter on their physician letterhead, and so then the power of attorney can't be activated, right? It's those, or the person, sometimes people with dementia, right, they may be a little combative. They don't want to leave their home. So how do we get them to the doctor in order to have that assessment made? So my preference is you're having the conversation with the person when they're still okay, and we say, who do you trust that if things got really bad, this person can go and step in without any roadblocks? And that's usually how I like to present it.
So from an understanding, so option 1, totally understand why it's more beneficial. Is it then that both people are technically then decision makers? Because, or how does that determine then, like, the person who's not capable, can they still technically do something because it's
Yes.
not been signed off, so to speak, by a doctor? Is
Yes,
that fair?
usually there's if it's going to be used, it's sent to the financial institution, and then the accounts get updated. So
Okay.
it would say, you know, Carolyn as agent for Brian. I'm picking on my husband today. He's disabled, and I'll kill him off later in an example. But that's how it becomes activated. The other thing I will often do if clients have revocable living trusts is I will make both spouses co-trustee of that trust. So that way, as if one spouse's health is starting to decline,
Gotcha.
we don't really need to do anything, right? If Mike has the investment account in the name of their trust, both spouses are named as trustee, well, the other spouse is already on there and can manage that account. And then it would only be if the other spouse is, you know, calling Mike saying he needs $100,000 for the man on the corner, that we'd actually have to remove that other spouse. But I like to try to make it as easy as possible for the family when that bad situation arises.
And Brian, just so you know, in my non-podcast life, I do offer life insurance if I can need assistance with the way your wife is so lovely describing it to me. So I digress.
And a food taster?
You're right,
Yeah.
literally. I mean, wow, I love it. So, Mike, anything to add on that?
No, and I've seen it where it works, right? And in the case of the woman I mentioned, her husband had passed away, so we updated her document, but we needed to have her resign as trustee of her trust, and.
Who do you pick then? And that's obviously
Yeah, well,
conversation.
and then you have the successor trustees in
Yep.
place, right? So, in this particular case, it's all worked out really well, but I can't tell you the number of times people come to us and they don't have these things in place, or they thought they had them, but they, because that's what happens a ton. What people have and what they think they have are many times two very different things, and that's why sometimes it's even good to just get a second opinion. Hey, we haven't looked at these in 5 years. It was done by an attorney that's now retired. What issues might we have?
So you're saying every family is not perfect? Is that what you're indicating to me? Okay.
Most families are not perfect.
Well, I'm learning things today. This is fantastic. Mike, you brought it up. We put together a plan 5 years ago. When you say that, how often should somebody review what they're doing? This is a generalization. I don't want you guys to be, put your toes to the fire, and then somebody says I didn't. They said every year, and I didn't, and that something happened 6 months in. So, generally speaking, how often would you recommend, whether it be them looking at it or them looking at it with a professional like yourselves?
Well, so from a financial planning standpoint, I think at least once a year you got to sit down with your advisor and just kind of level set. Hey, here's where you are. Here's what went well in 2024. Here's what's still on the table, things we got to get done. And I'll let Carolyn talk about the document side. But typically, if you get the documents done and they're done by someone like Carolyn who is thorough, I think it's probably every 3 to 5 years, unless there's been a development of, hey, a spouse has died, or, but a life event like that is gonna make everybody sit down anyways.
Someone moved and they didn't tell their attorney that they moved. You ever had that happen?
The attorney had to ask, hey.
Thanks for being on the podcast today.
So I would say every 5 years or so, if you're working with a good attorney, what I like to say is your estate plan shouldn't be like a car where every 3 months you need a little tune-up, because that means the attorney didn't do a good job of talking through issues when you first did the plan. So, I always like to say, because some people, I'll ask these questions, well, what happens if, your daughter can't act and you have one child? Oh, that'll never happen. And I say, no, we have to plan for that. Otherwise, if something happens, you have to come back and update it. Or worst case, something does happen and you don't have capacity at that point to make a change. And then, as Mike said, major life events, birth of another child, family member passing away. For business owners, selling your business, that's usually a big one, because some people, the business isn't worth that much, and then they sell it, and all of a sudden it's a lot larger estate value, and you have to make sure that the plan that you put in place originally can still fulfill the needs of that larger net worth that you have.
All right, guys, I have my favorite question that I came up with for today. So
here it comes.
Might be a little bit of planning that might be required here. So I'm going to limit you to 2 things each. So what are the top 2 things that you wish more people did?
Number 1, return my phone call. That's a little tongue-in-cheek. But,
that's 0, but yes, that's number 0. Yes.
Having people be a little more proactive about their financial futures. I meet people that spend more time planning a vacation where they're going to spend, $10,000 versus they've got an estate that's significantly larger, especially when you add in all the insurance, and they don't spend any time on it. I think the other big thing I would mention, and this, I'm sure you've seen this as well, is, insurability. So today you're in good health and you can get the life insurance you need, or the disability income protection, or the long-term care, right? But what happens out there? Well, all of a sudden you're not sleeping well, so you go to see the doctor, and the doctor says, hey, Matt, we're going to do a sleep study on you. You've got sleep apnea. We're pretty convinced you have it. Okay, so now your insurability, it probably hasn't gone away necessarily, but it's certainly not, if your twin brother, went in front of that same insurance agent or insurance company and didn't have sleep apnea, they're going to take him over you. So I think taking advantage of when you have insurability to get the coverages you need. And it's, somebody told me years ago, your good health buys it, your money pays for it.
You've said that before. I've written that one down. So
That's
use that one. I like to, just piggyback. It's funny what you say.
Hey, it's more sincere.
I would say just call me the week before, you're going to get sick. Or better yet, just call me the day before you're planning on dying, and we'll just get the policy in place. Does not work that way, but it sounds really good on paper. But yes, exactly. I love that. All right, Mike he didn't go ladies first to give you more time to come up with your answer. So thank him later, but what do you got?
Well, your comment helped me think of my first option is making planning a priority. Everyone knows that you need to create an estate plan, but people just think, it'll be done at a later date, or, I saw this great ad on Instagram that said I can create a will for $300.
Oh, yeah.
In those situations, they're great because I can make, a good living off of estate plans that fail and time in probate court. But the hardship that I see on the family when that occurs is awful. And so, as difficult as it is to talk about your own disability and your own death, it was even difficult, I do this for a living, but when it came time when my husband and I finally, a little later than we had hoped, did our own estate plan, it's hard to think through those things when it actually affects you. But you have to view it as this is, one of those things that you just have to get done in life, and then it'll make things much easier in the future. And then the second one is get a financial advisor, because I cannot tell you how much easier an administration is when the person is disabled or passes away when there is an advisor, because they've taken the steps to consolidate their accounts. I have some people disabled or pass away, the money's at 15 different banks. I can write the best estate plan out there, but when the money is all over the place and it's a giant mess, is it really, it doesn't help the family as much as possible. And it's so nice to have that connection with the advisor, because then the family knows, oh, we can call Mike or we can call Carolyn, and then get the answers we need, and things just move a lot faster as well.
The one thing I'll add to that, and Carolyn's point made me think of it, we had a client that, we did everything, got everything put together, had his trust funded, the whole thing. This guy was a serial pick up the phone, and if you offer him something,
Oh, free toaster.
he would buy it. Exactly. He was motivated by that. So when he passed, we thought we had everything in the trust. And we had about 95% of it in the trust. But he snuck a couple CDs by us that he kept in his name, and now we got to go through probate, which adds a lot of headaches, time, and expense, when it could have just been easily avoided. So sometimes they trick you.
And that goes back to the three-legged stool, remember? Because if the CPA is involved, then we know the CPA is going to know, hey, have you accounted for the interest that I've been reporting on some of those CDs?
Exactly.
Or a lot of people have those alternative LP investments and things, and the client doesn't necessarily remember, but the CPA will, and then in conjunction with the attorney and the financial advisor, we can get it all straightened out.
Yep.
So I've learned a lot, even though I knew a lot, I thought. But, I mean, the key here is having somebody that you have truly on your team. And having multiple people on your team is what I think is most important. So before we wrap up today, I want to give you both the opportunity. First, I want to thank you both for saying yes to this crazy idea of joining your best client possible on this podcast. So thank you for that. But any last words that either or both of you would like to add? Anything you've said today, anything I missed that you wanted to point out, kind of give you each a little bit of time here to just kind of wrap us up a little bit with any fine words for the audience.
So the one thing I would say is, as you're as someone who's navigating this process, it's really important to find people that you can trust and that you can have a long-term relationship with. So for anyone that doesn't have an estate plan, when they're looking to meet with an attorney, make sure it's someone that you could see yourself talking to when you have to call and say your spouse is now disabled or your spouse has passed away, and talk through those really difficult situations. And then, of course, in the case of a financial planner, that's a person they're going to talk to more often than the attorney, right? But making sure you have that, you can really maintain that long-term relationship, because it shouldn't be creating the estate plan and then never talk to that lawyer again, right? Because you want to make sure that you stay up to date with everything, and then it's truly, honestly, someone that you're really comfortable with.
Do you know a good attorney?
I mean, I might.
Okay, good. That's good. So, Mike?
I think I would add to that you need to make things not just important, but they also have to have some urgency to them. And, just like they say when you get your first job, pay yourself first. When you're looking at a financial plan, you don't necessarily think about all the assets that you have, especially as you're starting to move from your 30s to your 40s. But you got to remember you add the life insurance on top of that. And that includes any insurance you have through your employer, which is usually, they do a couple times your income in insurance. Make it important, make it urgent, get it done. You'll sleep better at night.
In a few years. Yeah.
In a few years.
Thank you both. Obviously, I want to let the audience know where they can find both of you. So for Carolyn, obviously, you can look up Caroline Hecht there. That's Hecht. And her email is checht@buckleyfinelaw.com. For Mike, obviously, If you Google Mike May, there might be more than one that comes up. But if you want to reach out to him via email, it's mike.may@spagwealth.com. And as always, if you want to find out more information about our nonprofit, LMJ's Lost Souls, you can visit www.lostsoulsandalz.org. And before we wrap up, as a reminder, this is a monthly podcast. I would love to connect with people who are looking to join me in the studio. If you know someone who has a connection to Alzheimer's or dementia, or is in the business of Alzheimer's support, or just has a business that wants to provide it, or that's able to provide a resource for memory care, please do not hesitate to reach out. So thank you so much for joining episode 3. Thank you again to Caroline and Mike, and we will catch you later. Thank you so much.